Right now I am hand printing t-shirts, and on those t-shirts I am printing artwork that I also did by hand, and this is a process which hasn't changed ever since I started screen printing, probably in the early 80s. But today I'm going to talk about AI art. I find it both disturbing and exciting. In fact, I could describe it as the good, the bad and the ugly. And I feel that there's a threat to artists out there, and people are going to lose jobs. There's no way around it. People are going to lose jobs over this. If I was in a band and we don't have much money, we want to put out a CD or something with a really cool cover, you could just type that into AI and get that. You no longer need to get a graphic designer to do that. So artists that are used to doing commission work, well, might want to pivot and change what you're doing. So when I first started art school, we were doing one night a week, we would study something called ticket writing. That was sort of like sign writing, calligraphy. It was actually for little point of sale stuff in shops. You know, if a butcher wants to say sausages are on special, such and such, they want a little bit of a card, they want an artist to ticket write on that. I learnt ticket writing. Computer came along, that's gone. But of course it's a skill that I learnt and I enjoy. I still do hand lettering, bigger handwriting. I like to do it by hand. I just enjoy that because it has that sort of vintage look to it. So it's all completely done by computer. So all those guys who were doing ticket writing then learnt sign writing, then learnt to do computer cut lettering, and at that time there was a lot of people just getting sign cutters, plotters, that were putting out work that was really ugly. So this is my first prediction of AI. We're about to see a stack of really ugly art. What I've noticed on my little stint on this planet is that humans are always prepared to drop their standards. So, sign writing, a beautiful refined art, boom, gone. As soon as the admin can make little signs, it just become another job for admin in places to make up little signs. Signs go everywhere, not handwritten ones, but you know, just typed out ones. Ugly, not as nice as hand painted signs. It gets the job done, we lower our standards. YouTube, anybody can make a video. Suddenly we have the jump cut. A professional filmmaker would never even consider a jump cut. They do this nice flowing cutaway shots, but jump cut, we get used to it. We've dropped our standards. Visual special effects, the actual real thing, the practical effects, like you look at 1983 The Thing, if you don't mind watching a bit of horror. Brilliant special effects, absolutely amazing special effects. You watch the digital remake of them with the CGI, it's lost a lot. So we get used to putting up with lesser quality. This is what's going to happen with art. You know, people are prepared to accept a lower standard of a heartless machine putting out lettering, because at the end of the day it's easy to read, it's fast, and you don't have to pay somebody to do it. So I can't help but draw parallels between this and photography. Photography shook up the art world like nothing else. Suddenly you know, you've got lords and ladies and rich people who are able to get portraits painted of themselves. Suddenly that sort of drops down to the middle class and get photographs taken of themselves. Professional photographers had a job for a while, putting portrait painters out of a job. People still paint portraits, even though there are photographers around. But it's not as much a viable living. So what's AI going to do? The same thing. It's just going to put a lot of people out of work. And it's going to produce something which is not quite as good, but the only people who are going to know it's not quite as good is artists. It's like you can go to McDonald's and get a hamburger, and it's always going to be that certain quality that's been lowered over the years, and we have come to accept that's Macca's, isn't it? McDonald's, it's what they do. A public which is willing to not pay the price for a quality item when there's a cheaper one around will lower its standards every time. So people who are not artistic will get there and go, yeah, that looks cool, that's fair enough, that's it. So you're going to get the uneducated people, which is not always a bad thing, saying what is the flavour of the day. Unfortunately, a lot of that looks like digital art. But I've been alive long enough to see lots of change. I've had to pivot quite a few times in my art career. Screen printing, what I'm doing now. When I started in the 80s, we were printing real estate signs, we were printing decals and stickers, we were printing signs for the side of vans. We were also printing circuit boards. It was like almost every flat surface we would screen print on, and the only thing that's really survived is t-shirts. So my business is doing quite alright because I promote it as hand-drawn, hand-printed t-shirts. So the artwork is all hand-drawn as opposed to digital. The printing is all done manually, as you can see, by hand. So part of my business is pretty much AI proof. I don't think it's all bad, and I'm going to play with this. So this is going to be the first of a few videos where I'm going to play with the idea of AI and see what I can do with it and see how I can incorporate it in my own art. I have been playing with it, and I've been just typing in prompts, coming up with all sorts of interesting stuff. Not so much with my t-shirt work. It's like I have two streams of artwork, if you like. I have stuff that I paint, and I have stuff that I do on t-shirts. The t-shirt stuff is a bit more just wildlife. Probably not as artistic, it's not as conceptual. Whereas my paintings, I can just do a painting on anything. In painting, oil painting, acrylic painting, I have the chance to play with all sorts of surrealism. I love doing snakescapes, snakes and armies, just playing with snakes because I am really interested in the reaction that people have towards snakes, either negative or positive, and how my art makes people feel. So I find that a really interesting concept. So as you can imagine, the way an artist works, comes up with ideas and then does really rough, scribbly thumbnail sketches of those ideas. I have lots of journals full of rough, scribbly sketches of ideas. And when I do that, there's a little bit of thought about composition. There's not a lot of thought about rendering, because rendering is something else. It's just the ideas. I found AI is like thumbnailing on steroids. I've already got a journal that's starting to fill up with printouts that I've done of the AI work. Some of that I've cut up, I've collaged, I've watercoloured, I've played with it, I've adapted it, I've made something new. Some of the printouts I get there and I put through the photocopier, it's called scanography, and I've moved it around to distort it a bit more, just to see what comes up. It's a little bit like chucking down a paint splat and then trying to make something out of that. But I found when I first started, the process was really, really ugly. And it wasn't until I started using my knowledge of art history to start playing with things to get them to look sort of like what I liked. Now, when you're influenced by art, by artists, and every artist is usually influenced by the artist that came before him, you can sometimes adopt some of their style, but then you move on, you find another artist and adopt their style a bit, you find another artist. I mean, when you start off it might be a bit derivative, but as you move on it becomes less and less derivative and it becomes more your own style. The artist Stan Keith once said that style is just where you get it wrong. So slight imperfections where you're getting it wrong, style. I think that's a pretty cool definition because it shows human imperfection, which is something I kind of like. So rendering with a nib and ink is something that gives me a lot of pleasure, and that's why my t-shirt art is always rendered usually with pen and ink. It's just one of those really yummy pleasures I have, and which is why I've never really taken to digital art that much, because digital art, when it started out, digital art was so ugly, really, really ugly. In recent times they have improved it, so you get that thick, thin, more organic look like you would if you were using a paintbrush or a nib. But I don't even like fine tip markers for the same reason. So mechanical line versus the hand. So yes, I'm using AI because I find it's good for filling up a journal full of ideas and inspiration. I think of something, chup it out, there it is, a visual representation of it. But how you choose the colour, I've been choosing Arthur Rackham a lot. To get something that doesn't look like just digital soulless art, I've actually been typing in Arthur Rackham, and very famous artist of the golden era of illustration. Beautiful work. And that's sort of muted down some of the colours into sort of burnt umbers and browns. Then I started playing with by Arthur Rackham by H.R. Giger, the artist who did the concept work for Alien. Now we're starting to get a bit of a mishmash between the two. What was disturbing was then I typed in by William Stout. Now it tried to shove some dinosaurs in there, because every one I'm doing it says snakescape or lots of snakes or snakes and waterfalls. A snake mountain and a sunset. And when I typed in William Stout, I got one piece that kind of looked reminiscent of William Stout's work, and made me sort of think, this is, I mean, I don't feel comfortable. I would not sell this work, absolutely. It feels like it's breaking copyright. But what is copyright? Copyright is where you sort of copy somebody else's artwork. This is derivative of William Stout's artwork. So what does this mean? At the moment, I think AI is the Wild West. You can almost do anything you want. There's no rules, there's no regulations. What's going to happen is that they are going to have to, at some stage, clamp down on this. Hopefully a big company like Disney, someone like that might weigh in and then change the nature of copyright. So that means it's going to go either two ways. Either the AI generators are going to have to pay artists for IP, for work that kind of looks like them, or if they use their name. Will AI end up like clip art? If you don't know what clip art is, it was in the 80s. If you were too lazy to employ an artist to draw something, you have something called clip art. which is just a whole stack of generic line drawings that prints really easy, that you cut out and stick in the photocopier and churn stuff out. And clip art always had that sort of almost soulless look. And maybe that's what we'll end up with AI. I think it's going to change the landscape of IP though. I think artists are going to have to start looking at, instead of copywriting their work, IPing their universe. So artists tend to create a whole universe. So take, for example, Batman. If you've got an image of Batman done by one of the artists, well, that is copyright by DC and possibly that artist. If you just draw Batman, you're still breaking IP. You might not be breaking copyright, you're breaking the intellectual property of DC Comics and Bob Kane or whoever. So that means that IP might become more valuable than copyright. But proving, you know, just going to make a few changes just to try and loophole around copyright. Well, IP is going to probably change a bit of that too. So we are in this sort of, like I said, at the moment, Wild West. If they do bring in laws, well, it's going to be interesting. So where do we go in the future? I'm going to do some experiments with AI. I'm going to play around with it. I'm going to try printmaking with AI. I'm going to try a few different processes, painting with AI, where I'll play around with some of the ideas, might cut up, collage, redraw bits, but then I might render it all myself and see where that takes me. Is this a great thumbnailing tools for artists? I would probably say yeah, it is. Is it a great rendering tool for artists? I'd probably say no, it's not. But then again, I'm not a connoisseur of digital art. I'm more of a connoisseur of actual physical line work. So it's going to be interesting where this leads in the future. So here's my t-shirt, long sleeve t-shirt. There's prints on the sleeve. There's little wombats on the front and back. There's a little wombat on the sleeve. There's a little name. I've done this because it's hard for a machine to do this. It's easier for somebody who does screen printing to do this. It's close to AI proof as I can get. I'm not going to say a machine can't do all this, but I hand drew it, I hand printed it. That's my selling point. I'm going to make some more videos about AI art. It's a big topic which is going to shake up the whole art world.